David Brewster here, new episode of Chordplay. This is the Chords of John Mayall, and it was just over a week ago when it was announced that John Mayall had passed away. Definitely a huge loss in music, and John Mayall was essential, a legendary musician and pioneer, and his career started around 1956, and then during his lifetime he released 36 studio albums, 34 live albums, 24 compilations, and 44 singles. And even though none of those singles actually hit the charts, 5 of his albums did hit the charts in the UK. Definitely, John Mayall was a legendary musician and the godfather of British blues rock. So I always found it interesting that Eric Clapton worked with John Mayall, in that original Bluesbreakers album. And then Clapton left and helped form Cream, and then Peter Green stepped in to replace Clapton. And there was kind of a revolving door between Clapton and Peter Green. And then finally Clapton did officially leave. Peter Green stayed with the band, recorded an album, and then Peter Green left and helped form Fleetwood Mac. And then Mick Taylor came in, worked with John, on a few albums or whatever, and then he left and joined the Rolling Stones. So there's a lot of other musicians that worked with John Mayall and the Bluesbreakers, but good luck finding 3 more important blues rock guitarists than Eric Clapton, Peter Green, and Mick Taylor. So the music and chord-based examples in this episode came from 3 John Mayall albums, and like I just mentioned, he's released 36 studio albums in his lifetime. That's a lot of music to go through. So when I put this together and I started kind of doing the research and everything, I thought, you know what, let's just hit Clapton, Peter Green, and Mick Taylor. We've hit Clapton and Peter Green before. This is the first time we've actually hit some Mick Taylor. But definitely, I thought, what better way to serve up John Mayall's music than to hit these 3 legendary recordings. With the opening, that's It Ain't Right from the Eric Clapton Bluesbreakers album, and this guitar part ain't right. It's this quirky, weird, busy blues rock riff, like this. Something like that. It keeps going. And I suspect this is actually John Mayall. And you have to think John played guitar and played rhythm on a lot of these songs. And for that one right there, it's really weird and interesting. It kind of reminds me of Hot Rod Lincoln, also Car Seats and Safety Belts from the band Cake. But it's this busy, weird riff. So it's basically E5 and E6 is what you're kind of implying with that first riff. But you can see we're playing the low E a couple times. And you're doing this kind of roll hammer on, but you want to pick that G sharp before you grab that B right there. And then you're going to do the same thing and then roll up and grab that C sharp, which is the 6th. So it has a weird rhythm and a weird feel to it, but it's really cool. And then just basically move everything over and now do it in A. Kind of targeting that A5 and A6. Go back to E. And this is really crafty right here. So it's all single notes kind of based around like B6, B7. Like that, back to A. And that's really cool with the open A, that C to C sharp E, and then you're playing with, G, which is the 7th, and then also that F sharp, which is the 6th. And then so you're kind of moving down an E right there, and then you're going to end up on that B7, back on the 5 chord. Cool, weird, quirky riff. Next up's the very famous All Your Love, also from the Eric Clapton Bluesbreaker album, and I suspect once again this is John Mayall on rhythm guitar because Clapton's the one playing lead. Very famous riff right here. like that. And you're actually going to find a lot of this kind of single note tic-tac, you know, kind of blues riffs in this episode. So it starts in A, and you're doing this A note and then a hammer on that D to E, and then kind of a staccato G, and then it's G, G to A, like that. Like that. And that second time, kind of extending that riff a little bit. So the first riff, second riff, and then repeat that again. Then it moves to D, the 4 chord right there, and you're kind of mirroring the same move. And then the second time it's a little different. And then right back to A again, back to the 1 chord. Go to the 5 chord to E, just 1 right there. And then D right there, slightly modified. Right there, you're going to do that hammer onto that A, and then that C to E, and then it's D to C. Right back to A. And then just end on a big A minor bar chord and slide it off. It's like a partial, so it's not the full A minor, but that one, like the Stairway to Heaven chord. Definitely a classic riff and a classic song, too. Next up's the song Checkin' Up on My Baby. This came from the album Crusade, so this is Mick Taylor on guitar, and once again we have the single note kind of blues rock riff like this. Now we're in C. You know, something like that. So we're in C, and we're basically just spelling out like C7. Because you're doing that C octave, then grabbing the flat 7, and then the 5th right there. And he's kind of doing like a smear bend on those flat 7s. Like that. Do the exact same thing in F down here and do that little smear bend on that E flat. Back to C. Now the 5 chord G right there, do the same thing. 4 chord to F, same thing. And then just end on that C twice. Next up, this is Standback Baby, also from the album Crusade. So this is still Mick Taylor on guitar. I think it's Mick and John on this one. Cool riff, though. There's a turnaround hiding at the end, like this. Something like that. So once again, single note kind of outlining chords, you know, riff, and we're doing this in B right here. So it's like the B octave, and then 2 of those A's. The second time add a little bit of vibrato, and then end on that 5th, that F sharp. Like that. And then go to the 5 chord. Now it's F sharp and do the same thing. And then go to the 4 chord E and do it twice, the same thing. And then back to B, the 1 chord. Back to the 5 chord F sharp. And that's where you hear a turnaround. So I was actually doing like that. So it's like octaves right there. B octave to A flat, G to F sharp, right? But then I'm also muting the A and muting the G, and I was also playing the open B string up there. And I think that's what's happening in the song. You can kind of hear it. And just end on that F sharp 7 down there. Cool riff, and I love those busy single note blues rock riffs. Cool riff. All right, next up, Snowy Wood. This is also from the album Crusade. So obviously I got hung up on Mick Taylor. We haven't featured him before, and Crusade's a great album. And I had to feature this one because it features the Hendrix chord, E7 sharp 9. But Snowy Wood's like this, really cool. Like that. So we're sliding this A to B and grabbing that D note, low E open, and then grab the Hendrix chord right there, E7 sharp 9. As soon as you play that chord, you're immediately going to basically just grab a single G right there from that chord, and then grab that G, E to D, and those are all single notes. Right? Right here, the chord changes to the 4 chord, A7, and he basically slides into the C sharp, grabs E, and he's playing with the 6, that F sharp. Like that. And that's all over A, right? And do it again. Do it again. Right here, he's basically moving to like a B minor or B minor 7, and he does. So right there, kind of moving into like a little part of that B minor, and then so it's kind of like this little stutter, and goes right back into the Hendrix chord riff. In that B minor again, but now the second part's a little different. So do that same setup. You're gonna bend this E to F sharp, and then this kind of playing with that D and E note. Cool riff, cool song, and Crusade's a great John Mayall album for sure, and Mick Taylor is a big reason for that. Alright, last but not least is The Supernatural, and this came from the album A Hard Road. So finally we're hitting some Peter Green. Sorry for the delay here, but I did get distracted by Mick Taylor and Clapton a little bit. But this is really interesting. It definitely has echoes of Black Magic Woman, things to come from Peter Green, and also Santana, of course. But it's really interesting because he's basically doing a lot of bar chords. This is definitely a bar chord workout. It's not really that hard to play, but I suspect this is what John Mayall played, because when you listen to the song, it's an instrumental. Peter Green's going crazy. He's got this very like sustaining kind of fuzzy tone, playing lead. He's holding bends and notes for a long time, and then you hear this chord progression kind of strummed in the background like this. Right there. So it's really basic. It's a good bar chord workout, but I like the way he's kind of changing, what chords he's playing, because he starts D minor way up here, and then it's C major to B flat major, right? And then it's going to D minor right there. So there was D minor, C major, B flat major to D minor like that. So I like that kind of mix and match of two different D minor chords. That one. And that one right there. minor for a while, then changed to A minor, the 5 chord. Back to D minor again. G minor down there. And then it's D minor, A minor, D minor, A minor. So it's not really hard to play, but check that song out because I'm pretty sure that's John playing rhythm. And then check out Peter's lead action going on. All that sustain and feedback and those held notes. Really cool. That's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with this look at the chords of John Mayall. Definitely a very essential and important musician. And I find it really interesting, like all the talent circling around, somebody like John Mayall, all the great musicians and guitarists that he worked with. It reminds me of other bands and artists. I recently did the guitarist of Steely Dan. All the great musicians revolving around Steely Dan's music. Not to mention people like Ozzy Osbourne, David Lee Roth, Whitesnake. There's lots of examples of this where these great musicians kind of join forces and they create and record great music. And with John Mayall, he definitely seemed like he was kind of a farmer, like picking like teenage, musicians and then bringing them into his band and recording them and pushing them. And it's really interesting to find those musicians, like Frank Zappa and players like that, where they were pushing the musicians in their band to do great things. Like, hey, that sounds pretty good, but can you make it better? Or can you play that faster? Or can you make that dirtier or nastier or whatever? And there's a lot of examples of that. But with John Mayall, he definitely was kind of the band leader and principal songwriter and stuff and vocalist. But it is interesting to kind of notice some of these songs and you listen to them and you hear Clapton or Mick Taylor or Peter Green playing, and then you kind of notice like those chords and riffs and rhythms in the background, and a lot of that was John Mayall playing, with those riffs and rhythm guitar parts. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to the Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you. And rest in peace, John Mayall.